Hello and welcome to the Sims 4 Ultimate Decades Challenge recap. For the 1320s, see how our Sims fared over the last 10 years, so let's jump right on into it. In 1320, we started off the year where we'd left Thornfinn and Hendry the year prior at the war camp, with both successfully surviving their roles and getting to come back home. A fantastic start to the new decade. As always, we made sure the family bonds were as tight as ever, and of course, we had to do our challenge, which though nerve-wracking was completely okay, and we were able to pay it off right then and there. Our teens spent more time getting to know their group of friends better in the hopes that they would find their soulmate, or at least someone they would be content spending the rest of their lives with. Apparently not a particularly easy task in The Sims, but I would say the attempt was a good one. Time was spent working on skills and hobbies, especially as Fergus dealt with an impending midlife crisis, and we hung out with Maud at the castle, where she continued to spend time getting to know potential partners. In regards to birthdays this year, over at the McIntyre household, Eric aged up into a toddler successfully, and Beatrix rolled for her young adult life stage, but rolled a 13 and so was doomed to die. Lucky for her, she was pregnant, and so she was given a few more days' time to live her life and spend time with her family. At the Boyd household, Finian aged up into a child, and back at the Fairbairn house, Clary gave birth to a baby boy, Alistair, who unfortunately did not survive his roles, passing from a low birth weight. The rest of the year was spent on continuing crafting creative outlets and hanging out with family members. 1321 started off at the McIntyre household as we not so patiently waited for Beatrix to give birth to a little boy, Harold, the last McIntyre baby, who unfortunately did not survive, passing from a birth defect. Though Beatrix survived her labour, her birthday roll from the year prior meant it was time to say our goodbyes. This was before I'd considered rolling to see how much time she'd have left in the young adult life stage, so we were having to mourn a Gen 1 sim way earlier than I would have liked or expected, especially as Thornfinn's pleas were ignored by Grimm. Directly after this horrible event, back at the Fairbairns, they were dealing with a fire. As usual, they all just walk around like headless chickens, and so Agnes caught on fire, though at the time not one of my favourite Sims, I wasn't particularly keen for her to die, and thankfully Fergus came to her rescue, extinguishing the fire and saving his daughter. Maud spent some time getting to know Jameson MacDonald better, as it was decided that he was the best candidate to be her partner. And because, for whatever reason, teens couldn't get engaged in-game, they made do and exchanged promise rings with each other, promising that at the right time they would be engaged and get married. So we did a yard sale to save some funds for Maud's dowry, and there were 2 teen birthdays this year, with Agnes and Maggie both successfully aging up. Agnes rolled to get married and have 7 baby tries, and Maggie rolled to have 11. Maud and Jameson got quote-unquote married at her family's home, with her parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins present, or at least as many as we could fit. And we made sure to fit in some family snowball fighting as well, because why not? The Boyds ended the year with David's child age up, which was unsurprisingly successful for the Boyds. We started 1322 with some war rolls, with Fergus and Thornfinn fine. Oswald was sent off to the campaign. Jameson, a new addition to the rolls, was also safe along with all the Boyd men. Caitlin was the only Sim to have a birthday this year, successfully aging up into a teenager and rolling to get married and have just 4 baby tries. We discovered that Katrina had developed a fear of crowded places, an unfortunate turn of events considering the number of Sims in her household and the fact that most of them were her children. Of course, we spent some time working on chores and hanging with family. Katrina came and visited all the way from the Highlands, probably as an excuse to leave her family at home, and helped Clary build a snowman. Time was also spent on harvesting our crops for the season and bonding with grandparents, a must for Agnes, who I would argue was probably their favourite grandchild. Christian and Evelyn went on a date at their local tavern where they became romantic partners and exchanged promise rings. Of course, we then had to plan a wedding, inviting all family members over again, this time to the Boyd household, to celebrate Christian and Evelyn's union. After a full day of celebrations and a little romantic time alone, we found out that Evelyn was pregnant and that she did not in fact want children. Maud gave birth to her first child, a little girl named Alison, with both mum and baby surviving and bringing a start to Gen 3. Such great news, which brought chaos with it, as Maud's entire family decided then and there that a stay over at the castle was the best possible idea, despite a heavily pregnant Clary waiting to give birth herself, and so they stayed at the castle for the rest of the year, to help Maud adjust to her new life, although they weren't much help, to be honest. Clary started 1323 at home, ready to finally give birth after her stay over at the castle. She gave birth to a little girl called Ada who survived her role, continuing Generation 2, whilst Generation 3 had only started a day prior in-game. A successful birth meant we had to celebrate the only way we know how, by spending some quality time with family, especially considering that Maud and Katrina had come over. Our teens had another little hangout, this time at the Fairbairn lot to, you guessed it, find a partner. Agnes got to know a few of the boys in town who she definitely found attractive but wasn't soulmates with anyone, and that was perfectly fine by me. But we did have a very successful match. Maggie and Arthur hit it off the minute they said hello, figuring out that they were soulmates. Caitlin and Callum shared a kiss despite having just met each other, but nothing really seems to have come of it. Over at the MacDonald family, little Alison aged up into an infant, and we discovered she was blonde. Evelyn gave birth to her first baby, Colum, with both mum and baby surviving. We also got to see the new Boyd Lodge for the first time in-game, which I hope will successfully hold all the Boyd family members in this household, because there is way too many of them. Whilst leaving the Boyd household, we discovered that Lewis and Caitlin were also soulmates, so that was 2 soulmate discoveries in 1 year. Eric aged up into a child, and Maggie and Arthur got to know one another a bit better. Ada also aged up into an infant this year and came out as another Clary lookalike. Not that I'd ever complain about that. We ended the year hanging out with the main household and spending more time scouting for a soulmate. In 1324, we reunited with Oswald and rolled to see if he survived a war campaign, which he did. Colum aged up into an infant and was instantly doted on by all his family members. Jameson passed his young adult role. Ada and Clary worked on some tummy time, whilst the rest of the Fairbairns went out to do some hunting, foraging, and so on. It was then, unfortunately, time to say goodbye to Deirdre, a prominent fixture in the Fairbairn household for the last 24 years. She had finally passed due to old age exhaustion. Though a deeply sad time for the family, I can say I'm glad she survived as long as she did in this challenge. Maud gave birth to her second baby, another little girl named Matilda, and both mum and baby survived their roles. Over at the McIntyres, we invited over the teens, again, surprise surprise, to see if Oswald possibly had a soulmate after 2 years at war. However, he did not, so he went on a little date with Jane, who he'd met a few years prior and seemed to get along with. Back at the Fairbairn home, it was time to roll for our heir's teenage birthday, and Dougal absolutely succeeded, securing the continuation of the Fairbairn lineage into the 3rd generation, and providing a bit of happiness in an otherwise sad time for his family. We headed back to the McIntyres for another sort of wedding, considering my game was still having that weird issue, and the start of 11 baby tries for Oswald and Jane began, and we found out we had another mini Beatrix, as Jane did not want to have children. Robert rolled to age up into a teenager and failed, our first in the challenge, and even though I stated after Beatrix's death that I would roll to see how long they had in that life stage, I promptly forgot 3 episodes later, and so we said goodbye to Robert, as well as he succumbed to poison. Maybe someone was out to get him? Once again, we headed to the McDonald's for more birthdays, with Matilda aging up into an infant and Alison rolling to become a toddler. Another hangout sesh to find love began, and Dougal found his soulmate with Miss Charlotte. And to end out the year with more sadness, Evelyn gave birth to Eleanor, who didn't survive her rolls, passing from falling out of her crib. In 1321, we spent all of day 1 with the Fairbairn family. James lost a tooth, and Ada became a toddler. And then all of a sudden, after a long day of hunting, trying to distract his mind from the loss of his wife a year prior, David came home and collapsed from overexertion, and reunited with Deirdre, leaving the household without any founders, and Fergus and Clary as the sole providers and carers of the home. Though everyone was sad and grieving, yet again, life unfortunately does go on, so Agnes went on a date with Billy Campbell, which was cut short due to a couple of births. Jane gave birth to her first baby Samuel, who didn't survive, passing from neglect, which made sense with the way Jane felt about children. Jane also did her role into a young adult, which she did survive. Maud also gave birth to Lucy, who didn't pass her roles either after being dropped, so for the 2 births this year, neither was successful. Arthur and Maggie went on a date and got quote-unquote married, Colm aged up into a toddler, and Maud into a young adult, which meant Jameson could finally propose to her properly. Of course, when everything seems to be going right in the challenge, a fire has to happen, but thankfully Clary put it out, and so to end the year, Agnes and Billy went on another little date and moved to their new home. Clary started 1326 impatiently waiting to give birth, so much so that she had her baby at the hospital. But despite that, both mum and baby, who we named Kenna, survived. I just had to hope that this would be the last baby Clary had, at least for a little while. Katrina popped over for a visit all the way from the Highlands to spend some time with her brother and his family. Caitlin and Lewis went on a little date to get to know each other before their wedding later in the year. Arthur successfully aged up into a young adult, and then it was time for Owen's teen role at the McIntyre house. He survived and rolled to get married and have 12 baby tries. 12. The McIntyres are really trying to surpass everyone with the amount of babies in their 3rd generation. Matilda aged up into a toddler, which she did by herself because I took too much time with the other birthdays, and we headed up to the McClery household for Maggie to give birth to her first child, little Helga, who passed from birth asphyxia. Maud and Jameson got properly married at her family home, a very cute and happy ceremony, of course with so many family members coming to celebrate, and Alison and Ada had the cutest interactions with each other. After the nuptials, Kenna aged up into an infant, and unsurprisingly she came out looking like Clary. What can I say? She's a cute sim. James also did his teenage role, successfully rolling to get married and have 11 baby tries. Like I said, the teens this year were rolling for big numbers on that die. Agnes gave birth to her first baby, Malcolm, who died, a seemingly running theme for this household, passing from a low birth weight. To end the birthdays for this year, Christian aged up into a young adult, which meant he would be getting married the next year. 1327 started off with the last set of war rolls for the First Scottish War of Independence, with the only Sims going this time being Oswald and Christian. Charlotte came over and hung out with Dougal for a little bit before Caitlin went into labour, giving birth to Flora, who passed from a breech birth. Thankfully for Caitlin, her family members were over and she could grieve with them. Evelyn finally went into labour after what felt like forever, giving birth to twins. The first set ever for the challenge and a complete shock, which meant I forgot to roll for her twice, though she would have survived anyway. She gave birth to Jessie and Jemima, with Jemima passing from falling out of her crib, like her older sister Eleanor in 1324. Dougal and Charlotte went on a little date where we found out that because she is a young adult they could get engaged, and James found his soulmate, Miss Marsley McBain. However, when Dougal did try to propose he was rejected, probably because they'd only just had their first kiss. Finian did his role to become a teenager and passed, rolling to get married and have 4 baby tries, a low but reasonable number. Jessie also aged up into an infant, and we also got our second redheaded baby for this new generation. Dougal finally proposed to Charlotte, and this time everything went well. Alison aged up into a child, and Maud gave birth to her first son, Wallace, with both mum and baby surviving. Maggie helped end the year by also giving birth, this time to Harriet, who survived her roles. In 1328, Ada and Kenna shared their birthday, aging up into infant and toddler respectively. Evelyn successfully rolled to become a young adult and gained the non-committal trait, which is great, I guess. Agnes gave birth to Morgan, who didn't survive due to being stillborn, and Billy rolled for his young adult life stage, which he failed. A first and a horrible blow for the Campbells, who seemed to have poor luck. Harriet aged up into an infant, and we finally got to do our last war rolls for a little bit, bringing both Christian and Oswald home to their families. Clary gave birth to Greer, who didn't survive her rolls, passing from a heart defect. And Clary also didn't survive her birth rolls either. Thankfully, Fergus's pleas weren't ignored, maybe Grimm felt sorry for all the recent loss, and Clary was saved and banned from trying to have any more kids, bringing an end to the babies of the second generation. However, in the midst of chaos, a fire broke out, and for whatever reason it was Clary, who had just given birth, died, and came back to life, but had to put it out. Wallace aged up into an infant, and then it was time for 2 weddings, with Dougal and Charlotte getting married, and Christian and Evelyn as well. Colin and David both aged up into their child and teenage life stages, with David rolling to never get married but have 7 baby tries. The last birthday and role for this year was Oswald's, successfully aging up into a young adult. Entering into the last year of the decade, Maggie gave birth to another baby, Hugh, who passed from malnutrition, and with the small number of baby tries available, for this family, I would argue that they have bad luck. Jane and Oswald got engaged and married. Agnes gave birth to Michael, who did survive his roles. And then we headed back to the McIntyres for Jane to give birth to twins, Olwen and Asta, with Asta passing due to being stillborn. Jessie aged up into a toddler, and Matilda into a child. Evelyn gave birth to John, who survived his roles. Caitlin gave birth to Connell, who also survived his birth roles. James and Marsley went on a date at his home and then he proposed to her, which was a surprise considering they're teens, and my game wouldn't allow that for a couple months. Back at the MacDonald's, Wallace rolled to age up into a toddler and failed, passing from smallpox. And just because I could, I rolled to see if anyone else contracted it and died, but thankfully those who did were perfectly fine. It did, however, mean they had to say goodbye to their son. Harriet, however, did successfully age up into a toddler, which ended the 18 rolls for this year on a good note. And then Michael and Olwen aged up into infants. To end the decade, we finally put David to rest at the cemetery 4 years after he had passed, but it's better late than never. Okie dokie, I think it's time to jump into arguably my favourite part of the decade recaps, which is our stats. So, we are looking at our Sims info chart, and as you can see, up to the end of 1329, we've got 35 Sims who are alive and 32 who have passed away, with a total of 67 Sims for the last 3 decades. Now, it's obviously going to look different from our last decade recap, which is why I really love doing these. I'm always fascinated to see the difference. But here we have David, our founder of the Fairbairn family, who passed in 1325 as an elder aged 55. His wife Deirdre passed the year before, aged 54, and Beatrix, their daughter, the youngest daughter, passed in 1321 at the age of 30. And this is obviously completely different from last time round because everyone was alive. Just can't believe it. We move on to Fergus and Clary, still part of the Fairbairn family, but now you can see all their kids. So, when we ended last decade, they'd only had up to Harris. Clary then had Alistair, who passed away in 1320, Ada and Kenna, who are still alive, thankfully, and Greer, her last baby, who died 2 years before the decade ended, and also caused Clary to die for a second there. So Clary's been having kids since 1304. That's such a big, time to be having kids. Clary was having kids for 24 years. This is the state of the Boyd family, Katrina and Hendry. Nothing's changed since the last recap because they stopped having kids. Much is the same with Thornfinn and Beatrix's little chart of families, although Harold didn't exist yet, so he's a new addition, although he has passed, but there are no more McIntyre babies from these two for obvious reasons. I don't think I need to restate that. Then we go into our new families for this decade. So Maud married Jameson in 1321, and she had her first baby Alison in 1322, with Matilda the next year, Lucy 2 years after, who did not survive, passing from being dropped as a baby, and then Wallace, who was around for 2 years but passed from smallpox. They have 3 baby tries left. We then have Evelyn and Christian, part of the Boyd family, who got married in 1322. They have Colum, who survived, Eleanor, who passed in 1324, falling out of her crib. Our twins, Jessie and Jemima, with only Jessie surviving and Jemima passing from also falling out of her crib, and John. And they've only got 1 more baby try left to have, which is sort of nerve-wracking, but they've got 2 boys. I don't want to jinx it, but they do have 2 boys, and that's how they ended out the decade. We've then got Oswald and Jane with their 11 baby tries, but there's actually should be 12 here because she had twins, and twins don't count into the extra baby tries. They got married in 1324. And their first baby was Samuel, who passed away in 1325 from being neglected, which checks out with the fact that she doesn't want kids. They then had twins. Oop, I never put in Olwen's information. That's really going to screw up my chart. Oopsies. There we go. I just forgot to put what year he was born, 1329, with his twin sister Asta, who passed away from being stillborn. We've then got the Campbell family, who have 11 baby tries, and they so far have only had one baby surviving. They had Malcolm and Morgan, who have both passed as babies from a low birth weight and a stillbirth, and they have Michael, who has survived. I've also got a female name right here sitting in the corner if they plan to ever have a girl, and they got married in 1325. We have Maggie and Arthur, who got married 1325 as well, and they have 5 baby tries, so they've only got 2 more left. They've had Helga, who passed from birth asphyxia, Harriet, who is alive, and Hugh, who's passed from malnutrition, and I'm giving them a little break because the small amount of numbers is freaking me out. That's left for baby tries. We then have Lewis and Caitlin, who got married in 1326. They have had, out of their 4 baby tries, 2, with 1 passing, Flora in 1327 from being breech, and Connell has survived. And then this is what the rest of it looks like. We are expecting Charlotte to give birth in the first episode of the next decade, because she is currently pregnant. So we've set that up, and they just get an unlimited number of baby tries. Hopefully she won't take 24 years to give birth to 11, 12 babies. 12 babies is what she can have. That's the household limit, but she could have more than that. I hope not, but she could. And Charlotte and Dougal got married in 1328. Owen is ready. Everything's ready for him for when he does find a partner. He hasn't found a partner at the moment. James and Marsley are rearing to go. They're going to get married in 1330, as it says right here, because that's what I've planned. And they have 11 baby tries. We have Finian with 4 baby tries. I've said he's slated to get married in 1331, but he hasn't found a match. And this is actually David. I don't know what to do with him because he's not getting married, so I don't think we'll have a wife of. Maybe we'll just get rid of this section and they can all just be son or daughter of David Boyd, or they can have individual sections, I'm thinking. I don't know, let me know. That's what this is looking like so far. I'm loving the gradient of colour, and I'm looking forward to Alison becoming a teenager because I can't wait for us to use another red colour. One day we'll get into the yellows. Now, let's go over to our stats. Currently we have 31 female Sims and 36 male Sims. There was a point there in the decade where the females were actually beating out the males, but we had a lot of boys born. They didn't necessarily survive, but they were born. And then our age of death, I did get rid of the infant because we don't roll for that life stage, but this has definitely changed from last time. We've got 24 babies who have now passed. I can't remember what we had last time, but maybe I'll pop it on screen. The number of babies that we had lost in the last recap. We have 3 toddler Sims who have passed, 1 child, 1 teen, currently no young adults, but that will be Billy at some point. Another adult, just 1 adult, which was Beatrix, and our 2 founders. We've got 67 Scottish Sims. That shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. All the Sims are Scottish. But coming into this new decade, we will have a new nationality to add, which I'm looking forward to. And then our generation of offspring. This has definitely grown, but that was just because of Clary, her 3 extra babies, and Beatrix's last baby. So there's now 32 Sims that were born in this second generation. And this will change, but currently 18 babies have been born in generation 3. And we still have many more marriages and many more births to go for this generation, so it'll, I don't know, probably hit 50? That is scary to think. And that is the stats. Let's hop over to the family tree, because that has definitely changed. So here it is. It is so massive, you can't even see it in one go. It's insane. So I guess we'll just go by branches, it makes it easier. So we have David and Deirdre Fairbairn. This is all the information I've already told you. We will drop down to our heir, Fergus. His wife is Clary, as we all know. We've got Maud, Agnes, Dougal, James, Ada and Kenna, and then all their babies that have passed. So we go from Fergus all the way down to Maud. Maud and Jameson are married. They're our MacDonald family now. They have Alison, Matilda, and Lucy and Wallace, although both these 2 have passed. We then go down to the second eldest child, Agnes, who married Billy Campbell, and they've had 3 babies, all starting with the name M, Malcolm, Morgan, and Michael, with Michael being the only one who has survived. We then go here to Dougal Fairbairn, who's married Charlotte, James, who he hasn't married yet, so Marsley is not slotted in, and then an Ada and Kenna. And yeah, that would be the main branch of the Fairbairn family. We then go to the second branch, which is the Boyd family. We've got Christian Boyd over here, who is married to Evelyn. So they've had Colin, who survived, Eleanor, who didn't, Jessie, who was twins with Jemima, who did not survive, and John. We then have Caitlin, who married Lewis and have now made the Reid branch of the Boyd family. And they've had 2 kids so far, as I mentioned, Flora and Connell. Robert, who unfortunately passed away, and he was so cute. Just look at him. I mean, the quality isn't the best. We've then got Finian and David. But that is the Boyd family. And then we go to our last one, which is the McIntyre branch. We've got Thornfinn and Beatrix, who's no longer with us. Oswald, who married Jane. They have 11 baby tries. They so far have just Orwen. They have had Samuel and Asta. We then move on to the McClery household, which is Maggie and Arthur. And they've had 3 kids as well, with only Harriet surviving. Maybe it's an A name thing, maybe it's like a second child thing with this branch of the family, I don't know. Then we've got Owen, who is set to get married at some point, and Eric, who is actually aging up into a teenager in 1330, which is exciting. But yeah, isn't this cool how it kind of just like spans, and I love seeing the little branches grow. I can't wait to see, hopefully, it grow down here. I'm just excited to watch this grow. This is also like another favourite part of mine of doing the challenge. This is the Fairbairn family, and this is our decade recap for the 1320s, 1320 to 1329. But I do hope you enjoyed it and you liked seeing what our Sims were up to for the last 10 years, what our stats have looked like, what our family tree has looked like. If you are new and you've never watched this challenge before and it's the first video you've come across, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're intrigued. I hope maybe you'll go back to see what these Sims were doing for the past 3 decades. These recaps can't give as much information as the episodes do, but there is about 30 at the moment. And if you're not new or you are deciding to tag along for the journey, let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen in the 1330s. If you can suss out what plans I might have for these Sims, where you think some of them are going to go, what you think some of them are going to do. I'm interested to see what you think these Sims will be up to. I hope you have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are watching, and I will see you for the next one in 1330. Bye!